I never thought one ordinary afternoon could completely change the way I saw my home, my stepmom, and even myself. My name is Alex, I'm 18 years old, and I have always been someone who quietly observed life rather than jumping into it. I live in a house that's deceptively calm on the surface, but beneath that calm, rules dictate every move I make. The most important and frustrating of these rules comes from my stepmom, Mrs. Carmichael. She has a single, unwavering command: no boys in this house. It sounds simple at first. Just a rule, like keeping your shoes in the hallway or washing your dishes. But for me, it's a rule that complicates everything. My stepmom means it literally. My biological father is often busy with work, traveling from city to city, leaving me mostly to navigate this house under her strict supervision. And now, I realize, even my closest friends can't visit freely. The house, with its polished floors and neatly organized rooms, has become a cage where I am expected to behave, obey, and never cross the invisible lines she's drawn. I wasn't always aware of the way these rules would shape my life. As a kid, I liked clothes, colors, and designs. I spent hours trying on my sister's old dresses in secret, pairing them with shoes that were far too small for me, imagining the way I would look if someone actually saw me. It wasn't about rebellion at first, it was curiosity, fascination, and the comfort of being someone else, even for a few minutes. But as I grew older, that secret became a private world I could escape to when the house felt too strict, too quiet, or too demanding. It was a way to breathe, to feel free in a life that often felt suffocating. Emma was my first real connection to the outside world beyond these walls. She is the kind of person who walks into a room and immediately changes the atmosphere. Bright, confident, endlessly curious about people, she somehow saw me as more than just Alex, the quiet, rule-abiding stepchild. Our friendship started in school, and over time, it grew into something I didn't fully understand at first: affection, trust, and perhaps more than either of us could admit. We laughed together, shared secrets, and on more than one occasion, I wished she could see all the sides of me, including the one my stepmom tried to suppress. But Emma and I had boundaries too. With my stepmom's rules hovering over every visit, every phone call, and every plan, we had to be careful. Emma didn't know about the secret world of clothes and makeup I had built in my room, a room she had never entered. I wasn't sure how she would react if she did. Curiosity mingled with fear. The fear that she might judge me, or worse, that my stepmom might find out. I had learned early that discovery could mean punishment, restriction, or the end of the few freedoms I allowed myself. It was on one of those ordinary afternoons that my life started to shift. My father had gone on another business trip, and the house felt quieter than usual. Emma had texted me earlier, asking if I wanted to come over, but I had to decline. I promised her we would meet later, but that left me alone in a house where every sound seemed louder, every shadow more imposing. I wandered into my room and looked at the collection I had hidden away over the years: dresses, shoes, accessories, scarves, and a small box of makeup my mother had bought before she passed. Each piece carried a memory, a feeling of freedom, and a reminder of the self I rarely got to express. I picked up a soft lavender dress, its fabric smooth against my fingers, imagining how it would feel against my skin. My heart began to race, not out of fear yet, but anticipation. I had learned that this was always the most thrilling part: the choice. Choosing the outfit, the accessories, the shoes. Each choice was a step away from Alex, the obedient stepchild, and a step toward someone I barely knew, someone I could become for just a few hours. I set the dress on my bed and stared at it. I could hear Mrs. Carmichael moving downstairs, humming a tune, completely unaware of the storm of emotions brewing in the room above. I knew that if she came upstairs now, she would immediately see me as a boy who dared to dress like a girl, and the consequences would be swift. But in that moment, the risk didn't matter. What mattered was the escape, the transformation, and the way it made me feel alive. As I began to change, slipping the dress over my head, I felt an odd mixture of vulnerability and excitement. The fabric felt cool against my skin, and I smoothed it down, imagining how I would move in it. Shoes followed, heels that had been too small when I first tried them, now fitting perfectly after years of secret practice. Makeup came last, delicately applied, highlighting features I rarely got to acknowledge. As I looked into the mirror, I didn't just see a reflection, I saw two versions of myself staring back. One was Alex, the boy who followed the rules, kept quiet, and never drew attention. The other was a version I had kept hidden for years, a version free, expressive, and alive in ways I had only dreamed of. The moment was electric. It wasn't just about clothes or makeup, it was about identity, courage, and the thrill of defiance. I heard a creak from the stairs and froze. My stepmom was approaching the hallway. My heart pounded as I realized how close I had come to discovery. Every sense was heightened: the sound of her voice humming downstairs, the feel of the fabric against my skin, the sight of my reflection that promised freedom and fear all at once. And then I heard a message ping on my phone. Emma. She had sent a text. "Hey, are you free? I want to see you." My pulse quickened further. Could I meet her like this? Could I finally show her this hidden part of myself, or would it destroy everything we had built? The answer wasn't clear, and that uncertainty was intoxicating. It was a choice, a challenge, and a temptation all at once. I realized then that the house, the rules, and even my stepmom's strict command were no longer the only challenges I faced. The real challenge was within me, deciding how far I was willing to go to embrace the person I was inside, the person I rarely got to show. And as I stared into the mirror, balancing between excitement and fear, I knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The moment I slipped fully into the lavender dress, a strange exhilaration took hold of me. My reflection no longer belonged solely to Alex, the boy who lived quietly under rules I couldn't escape. It belonged to someone bolder, someone free to explore an identity I had locked away for years. I touched the fabric softly, feeling the gentle sway as I moved toward my mirror. The shoes clicked lightly on the polished wooden floor, and the sound made me aware of every step, every movement. Each motion reminded me that I had crossed into a space where freedom and fear coexisted. I experimented with my stance, turning slowly, feeling the dress fall perfectly. My heart raced as I considered my next step. Makeup had always been my secret thrill, the way colors and textures could alter perception and evoke confidence. Carefully, I applied foundation to smooth out imperfections, then brushed subtle eyeshadow across my eyelids, the gentle hues highlighting the curve of my features. I added a touch of mascara, making my eyes appear larger, softer, more open to the world. Lips followed, lightly glossed, balancing between innocence and allure. Every application heightened my awareness of who I was becoming, and the mirror reflected a self I both recognized and longed to meet. Yet beneath the thrill, fear lingered. Mrs. Carmichael's voice might echo down the hallway at any moment. I thought of her rules, the absolute prohibition against boys occupying the house freely, and how discovering me like this would shatter the calm facade she maintained. But the fear didn't stop me. It became part of the excitement, a test of courage I had never fully acknowledged. The longer I stared at my reflection, the more I realized that this transformation was not just about appearance, it was about claiming a part of myself that had been suppressed, hidden beneath layers of obedience and expectation. I moved carefully to my dresser, selecting accessories that completed the transformation. A silver bracelet that had once belonged to my mother, small earrings, and a delicate scarf I could drape around my shoulders. Each item carried personal significance, grounding me even as the thrill of change surged through me. When I fastened the final piece, a necklace that rested lightly against my collarbone, I felt a mixture of power and vulnerability. I was more visible than ever, yet completely hidden. The duality thrilled me. The mirrored reflection wasn't just of a different appearance, it was of a different self, one I had longed to become without fully admitting it to anyone, not even to Emma. The quiet of the house magnified every sound. The ticking of the clock, the subtle hum of the air conditioner, and the distant creak of the stairs made me hyper-aware. I moved toward the window, peeking through the blinds, imagining what it would be like if someone outside could see me. Of course, no one was there, but the fantasy intensified the feeling that this moment was dangerous, exhilarating, and utterly mine. I took a deep breath, letting it settle my nerves. This was my sanctuary, a space where I could explore the thrill of transformation without consequence, at least for now. But the excitement was complicated by another thought: Emma. Her text still blinked on my phone. She wanted to see me. I could meet her outside, away from the house, and reveal this hidden side, but doing so carried risk. What if someone saw us together? What if she didn't react the way I hoped? Questions tumbled through my mind. I was caught between desire and caution, between the urge to embrace freedom and the need to obey the unspoken rules of my home. The uncertainty made my heart pound, and the thrill of the forbidden added intensity to every small movement I made. I decided to test myself. I walked through the living room, the dress swishing around my legs, my heels clicking softly against the floor. Each step was deliberate, conscious. I was learning how to inhabit this persona fully, not just in my room but in the spaces beyond. Every creak of the floorboard heightened the suspense. I imagined Mrs. Carmichael walking in at that moment, her eyes widening in shock and disapproval. My pulse raced, but I didn't stop. The idea of being caught both terrified and thrilled me. It was a dance of control and vulnerability, and I was learning the steps quickly. Hours seemed to stretch as I moved through the house, practicing gestures, adjusting hair, and perfecting expressions in the mirror. My mind wandered to the past secret moments in childhood when I had experimented with clothing and makeup, when curiosity first blossomed into fascination. Those memories, once tinged with guilt and fear, now felt like guidance. They told me that this desire, this secret part of me, was not something to be suppressed. It was something to explore, to embrace cautiously but fully. The suspense escalated as the afternoon sunlight shifted, casting new shadows across the walls. Every movement seemed more dramatic, more noticeable. I could imagine my stepmom stepping through the door at any moment, ready to enforce her rules. My stomach twisted at the thought, yet I continued, unable to stop. This tension, the delicate balance between safety and risk, became intoxicating. I realized that the thrill of transformation was not just physical, it was emotional, psychological. I was learning who I could be when no one was watching, and even imagining what might happen if someone did watch. Then, a sudden sound made me freeze. A knock at the front door. My heart jumped. Was it Emma? Or someone else? The knock was cautious but deliberate. I moved toward the door, careful not to make a sound that would betray my new appearance. Peering through the peephole, I saw a delivery man holding a package. Relief washed over me, but the encounter reminded me that outside forces could always intrude, always threaten the fragile cocoon I had built around this secret world. It was a small, almost trivial moment, yet it added layers to the suspense, the constant awareness that discovery was possible at any moment. After the delivery, I returned to my room, the adrenaline still coursing through me. I sat in front of the mirror, adjusting the scarf around my shoulders. The transformation was now complete. The reflection staring back at me was confident, poised, and undeniably different from Alex, the boy who had walked into the room hours earlier. And yet, the reflection was mine. I could feel the duality within me, the combination of excitement, fear, and anticipation that made every gesture feel meaningful. This was no longer just play or fantasy, it was an exploration of identity, an expression of self I had longed for but never dared to fully embrace. I had never felt so alive, yet so exposed. Sitting in front of the mirror, I studied every detail of my transformation, the smooth lines of the dress, the delicate curve of my lips, the subtle shimmer in my eyeshadow. It was intoxicating to see myself reflected in a way that was entirely new. But as the thrill sank deeper, so did the awareness of the risk I was taking. Mrs. Carmichael could appear at any moment. One wrong creak of the stairs, one door opening unexpectedly, and my secret would no longer be mine. The thought made my pulse quicken. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that the house was empty, at least for now. The quiet was deceptive, a fragile layer over the tension I felt inside. Every creak of the floorboards under my heels sounded louder than it should have, every shadow seemed to stretch further, every tick of the clock marked time slipping away toward the inevitable return of someone who could expose me. Yet I stayed, frozen in both fear and exhilaration, exploring the delicate balance of visibility and concealment that defined these moments. Emma's text was still on my phone. My fingers hovered over it, hesitant. Part of me wanted to respond immediately, inviting her into this hidden world I had only allowed myself to explore alone. Another part of me recoiled, fearful of what might happen if someone noticed or if she reacted differently than I hoped. The message became a mirror of my own conflict, a test of courage that demanded a choice. Should I reach out and risk everything for connection, or should I retreat into the safety of my secret world? The uncertainty was like electricity through my veins. I paced the room slowly, testing the movement of the dress, the weight of the heels. Each step reminded me of the duality within myself: the boy Alex, obedient and cautious, and the person I was becoming in the mirror, expressive and unafraid. That duality was the essence of the tension, the conflict that drove every heartbeat, every thought. I realized that the challenge was not just physical but emotional. Every small movement, every adjustment of clothing, every glance at my reflection was a negotiation with fear, desire, and identity. Suddenly, I heard a soft creak on the stairs. My heart leapt. I froze mid-step, listening intently. The sound stopped, then shifted slightly, as if someone had paused, reconsidering each movement. My mind raced. Was it Mrs. Carmichael returning early? Was the house no longer empty? The suspense wrapped around me like a vice, tightening with each passing second. I considered ducking behind my bed or slipping out the window, but neither option felt entirely safe. The tension escalated, each moment stretching longer than the last. I reminded myself of my training, the countless hours spent moving quietly, learning the nuances of heels and delicate fabrics, practicing gestures that appeared natural while hiding the thrill beneath. It was a skill born of necessity, cultivated in secrecy, and sharpened by fear. I moved slowly toward the hallway, testing the sound of each footfall. The reflection in the mirror seemed to watch me with quiet approval, the duality of my identity both reflected and celebrated. I felt the power of control, even as the risk reminded me of the fragility of my situation. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The house remained silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the ticking clock. I allowed myself a small, cautious smile. The transformation had not only changed how I looked, but how I felt. Confidence coursed through me alongside vulnerability. I was aware of every sense, every detail, every potential point of exposure. And yet, I knew that this exploration was essential. It was no longer merely about clothing or makeup. It was about asserting the identity I had hidden for too long, about embracing the complexity of who I was beneath the rules and expectations of my home. I moved to the window again, peeking through the blinds. The street outside was quiet, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the lawn. It felt safe, detached from the rules inside, a space where the person in the mirror could exist without fear. And yet, I knew that safety was temporary. The suspense was built into every moment, a constant reminder that exposure could happen at any second. That knowledge made the experience more intense, more addictive, and more necessary. It was a delicate dance between freedom and risk, one I had learned to navigate carefully but passionately. The next hour passed in a blur of small movements and deliberate gestures. I adjusted the scarf around my shoulders, practiced the tilt of my head, and examined the way the dress flowed as I moved. Every small detail mattered. Each adjustment was both rehearsal and exploration, a rehearsal for a moment that might never come, and a chance to inhabit the persona that had remained hidden for years. The thrill of anticipation mingled with the fear of discovery, creating an emotional cocktail that made time both slow and accelerate at once. And then, unexpectedly, the knock came. Not at the front door this time, but at my bedroom door. My body froze. The sound was deliberate, confident. Someone was here. My heart raced, pounding against my ribs as adrenaline surged through me. I knew immediately that this was the moment of reckoning, the moment that would test everything I had cultivated in secrecy. The knock echoed through the room, each rap a heartbeat that seemed to mirror my own, each pause a question I could not answer. "Alex? You in there?" The voice was familiar. Emma. My pulse surged with a mix of excitement and panic. She had come, unexpectedly, and I had to decide instantly. Could I reveal myself in this moment, fully transformed, and trust that she would understand? Or should I hide, retreat, and maintain the fragile illusion of normalcy? The weight of the decision pressed down on me, each option fraught with risk, each possibility carrying its own emotional consequences. I swallowed hard, feeling the dress cling slightly to my skin, the heels amplifying every nerve ending in my feet. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the door, my reflection still in the mirror behind me, silently urging me forward. The suspense, the fear, and the exhilaration intertwined, creating a moment that was fragile, fleeting, and infinitely intense. One step, one choice, and everything could change forever. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then opened the door. Emma stood there, sunlight catching her hair, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Alex?" she asked, tilting her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. There was something in her expression, an openness, a hint of surprise, and a spark of understanding that made my heart skip a beat. The tension that had coiled so tightly inside me began to unravel slightly, replaced by a new, thrilling uncertainty. Could she see me like this and not judge me? Could she understand the person I had hidden for so long? "Hi," I managed, my voice shaking slightly. "I wanted to show you something." My fingers fidgeted at the edge of the scarf, the fabric brushing nervously against my hands. I took a step back, motioning for her to come in. The room felt suddenly smaller, charged with the electricity of anticipation. Every detail, the mirror, the dresses, the scattered accessories, seemed amplified. The quiet of the house became a canvas on which this new, fragile reality painted itself. Emma stepped inside cautiously, her eyes flicking between me and the reflection in the mirror. "Wow," she whispered, almost breathless. "You look different. Amazing." Her tone was gentle but unmistakably impressed. Relief washed over me, mingling with a surge of confidence. Here was someone I trusted, someone whose opinion mattered, validating this secret part of myself. The fear that had gripped me for hours softened, replaced by the thrill of connection and acceptance. We stood in silence for a moment, letting the weight of the moment settle. I adjusted the scarf again, unsure if I should explain, hide, or simply let the transformation speak for itself. Emma stepped closer, tilting her head to examine the details, the subtle shimmer of eyeshadow, the gentle curve of my lips, the way the dress fell so naturally. "Alex," she said softly, "you look like you're exactly who you want to be." Her words struck me, resonating in a way I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about appearance, it was about recognition, acknowledgement, and acceptance of the self I had long concealed. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of vulnerability pressing against my chest. I've never really shown anyone this side of me," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not my friends, not anyone. I wasn't sure how they'd react." The confession felt like a release, a shedding of the years of secrecy and caution that had defined so much of my life. And yet, fear lingered, fear that this openness could still backfire, that discovery might still bring judgment or rejection. Emma reached out, lightly brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, her fingers lingering just slightly on my cheek. "You're brave," she said, her eyes locking with mine. "And you don't have to hide anymore. Not from me." The words were simple, yet they carried weight, shattering some of the tension that had held me captive. I felt my heartbeat slow, the adrenaline ebbing as understanding and connection replaced the acute suspense. For the first time, I realized that this secret could be shared, and that sharing it might bring not punishment, but freedom. We talked for hours, or it felt like hours, about small details, about clothing choices, makeup techniques, and the feelings tied to each transformation. Emma's curiosity was genuine, never judgmental. She asked questions, offered observations, and laughed softly at moments of awkwardness. Each interaction strengthened the bond between us, turning what had begun as a secret thrill into a shared experience. I found myself relaxing, letting the walls around my identity crumble just enough to allow her in. Yet, the house remained a silent observer, its polished floors and orderly rooms reminding me of the ever-present rules. Mrs. Carmichael could return at any moment, and the danger of discovery was never far from my mind. Each creak, each shadow, each faint noise reminded me that the safety of this moment was temporary. The suspense lingered, threaded through every laugh, every glance, every delicate movement. Even in connection, the risk remained a tension that heightened the experience, making each choice more poignant and each revelation more intense. Emma noticed my sudden stiffening, the way my eyes flicked toward the hallway. "Is someone coming?" she asked softly. I shook my head, trying to mask the anxiety that surged anew. "No, Just thinking, I muttered, though the tension was palpable. She smiled knowingly, her gaze steady and reassuring. We'll figure it out, she said. Together. Her confidence lent me courage, but it also underscored the fragility of the moment. This fragile cocoon we had built could be pierced in an instant, and yet, for now, it remained intact, a small sanctuary of acceptance, trust, and shared understanding. As the afternoon faded into early evening, the room was bathed in warm, golden light. Shadows stretched across the floor, echoing the duality within me, the Alex who existed under rules and expectations, and the person I had revealed, expressive and alive. The thrill of transformation, the intimacy of trust, and the constant undercurrent of suspense combined into a potent emotional mix. I realized that this was the essence of my journey, exploring identity, embracing risk, and discovering who I could be when both fear and acceptance coexisted. And then, as if to remind me that suspense was never far away, I heard the faintest footstep from the hallway. Mrs. Carmichael had returned. My heart leapt violently, adrenaline surging through my veins. Emma's eyes widened, and she instinctively pressed herself against the wall, giving me space. The tension that had simmered all afternoon erupted into a palpable, immediate threat. One step, one movement, and everything we had shared, every secret, every moment of vulnerability, could be exposed. I froze, knowing that the next moments would define how far I was willing to go to protect my secret, and how much risk I was willing to embrace for the thrill of transformation and connection. My body froze as Mrs. Carmichael's footsteps grew louder, each one echoing ominously against the polished floors. I could feel Emma's presence beside me, her hand lightly brushing my arm in silent encouragement. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, every shadow more pronounced. My pulse raced, the thrill and fear intertwined, each beat a reminder of how precarious our situation had become. One wrong move, one slip, and the fragile world I had built with Emma could shatter in an instant. I glanced at the mirror and noticed a strand of hair that had fallen across my face. My reflection seemed almost mocking, a dual image of vulnerability and defiance staring back at me. I quickly tucked it behind my ear, aware that even the smallest detail could betray my secret. Emma's eyes followed my movements, her expression a mixture of fascination and concern. She didn't speak, and neither did I. Words could have betrayed us. Silence was our shield, our only weapon against immediate discovery. The footsteps paused outside my door. My heart pounded as if trying to escape my chest. I could hear Mrs. Carmichael muttering to herself, the tone indifferent but unnervingly precise. Every word, every breath, every pause intensified the suspense. I adjusted the scarf around my shoulders, the fabric a tangible reminder of the identity I had assumed, the transformation that had given me both power and fear. The duality within me, Alex, and the person I had revealed clashed violently, yet somehow intertwined, creating a tension that was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. Emma shifted slightly, her eyes meeting mine, a silent question passing between us. Should we hide? Should we confront? My instincts screamed caution, but a part of me, bold, desperate, craving acknowledgement, wanted to stand firm, to embrace this identity fully, no matter the risk. The thrill of defiance mingled with the fear of consequences, each emotion amplifying the other, creating a heightened awareness of every sound, every shadow, every movement. The room was alive with suspense, charged with the potential of discovery, yet grounded in the trust and connection we had fostered together. I took a careful step toward the wardrobe, the heels clicking softly against the floor. The sound seemed amplified in the tense silence. I needed a prop, something symbolic, something that could anchor me if the situation spiraled. My fingers grazed a small, ornate mirror that had belonged to my mother. Holding it, I felt a rush of reassurance and empowerment. The mirror reflected not just my appearance but the complexity of my identity, the delicate balance of fear, confidence, and vulnerability that defined this transformation. In that moment, the mirror became more than glass. It was a talisman, a symbol of the self I was daring to embrace. A sudden shift in the hallway made me freeze. Mrs. Carmichael's voice, soft but unmistakable, called out, "Alex, are you there?" The syllables cut through the tension like a knife. I felt Emma tense beside me, and I gripped the mirror tighter, my knuckles whitening. The seconds stretched endlessly, each heartbeat echoing in my ears. My mind raced, calculating every possible scenario, weighing every action. The thrill of being caught, the fear of exposure, and the exhilaration of defiance fused into a single, potent emotion that left me both paralyzed and acutely alive. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. The mirror became a focus, a way to center my swirling thoughts. I adjusted my posture, lifted my chin, and allowed the reflection to reinforce the confidence I needed. The duality within me, the obedient boy and the expressive persona, merged briefly into a single, cohesive presence. I realized then that the suspense, the risk, and the potential for discovery were not just threats, they were catalysts, sharpening my awareness and intensifying the emotional stakes. I was learning, in real time, how to inhabit both fear and courage simultaneously. The hallway grew silent again. Mrs. Carmichael's footsteps receded, the tension easing slightly but not dissipating entirely. I exhaled slowly, the air heavy with relief and lingering fear. Emma looked at me, her expression a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "You handled that beautifully," she whispered. Her words, soft yet full of sincerity, grounded me, reminding me that connection and trust could coexist with suspense and danger. The emotional intensity of the moment left me shaking slightly, but in a way that felt alive, awakened, and profoundly human. I placed the mirror back on the dresser, my reflection lingering in my mind. The symbolic act of holding it, even briefly, had reaffirmed my identity, strengthened my resolve, and heightened my awareness of the delicate balance between concealment and expression. Every choice, every movement, every glance in the mirror had become part of a narrative that was uniquely mine. The suspense was no longer just external, it had woven itself into the fabric of my emotions, shaping each reaction, each decision, each breath. Hours passed in a blur of preparation, reflection, and cautious exploration. I practiced small gestures, fine-tuned my expressions, and rehearsed the subtle movements that made this transformation feel natural. Emma watched, asked questions, and offered gentle guidance, never judgment, only curiosity and support. The bond between us strengthened, and the thrill of sharing this secret added depth to every interaction. The suspense, though ever present, became a backdrop to an emotional journey that was unfolding with each passing moment, each heartbeat, each careful movement through the house. And then, as the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, a final sound shattered the fragile calm, a distant voice calling from downstairs, unmistakably Mrs. Carmichael. My heart leapt. The suspense reached its peak. Every muscle tensed, every nerve alerted. Emma's hand found mine instinctively, a lifeline in the storm of tension. The moment had arrived when risk and revelation could no longer be postponed. The transformation, the trust, the identity I had cultivated, all of it hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of discovery and confrontation. The next few moments would define everything. The house felt like a cage, every shadow stretching into shapes that whispered warnings. I could hear Mrs. Carmichael's voice downstairs, calling softly to no one in particular, yet its presence pressed heavily on my chest. My hands trembled slightly as I clutched the edge of the dresser, my reflection in the mirror catching every flicker of fear in my eyes. Emma stood behind me, her presence steady but equally tense, her hand brushing mine as if to remind me that we were facing this together. The thrill of transformation, once exhilarating, now mingled with a raw, urgent fear. One wrong sound, one creak of the stairs, one sudden glance from Mrs. Carmichael, and our secret, our fragile sanctuary, could shatter completely. I moved toward the window, checking the street below for any sign of movement. It was quiet outside, almost too quiet. The shadows of trees stretched across the lawn, mirroring the tension inside the room. Every small sound, the distant hum of a car, the rustle of leaves, the faint ticking of the clock amplified my anxiety. Emma followed closely, her eyes scanning the room as if she too sensed the delicate balance between safety and exposure. We were no longer alone in our secret. The presence of someone else, someone who could enforce rules and punish deviations, was imminent. The suspense became almost unbearable. Then, a creak from the staircase froze us both. My heart leapt violently, a staccato rhythm that threatened to betray my presence. I felt the heels under my feet press into the floorboards, the smooth fabric of the dress brushing against my skin, a constant reminder of the duality I embodied. Emma instinctively pressed closer, her breath light against my shoulder. The footsteps paused just outside my door, deliberate, measured, and perfectly aligned with the rules that governed this house. Every second stretched into eternity as we waited, silent and tense, for the next moment that would determine the trajectory of our secret. The doorknob rattled slightly. Mrs. Carmichael's voice called from the hallway, "Alex, I know you're in there." The words were soft but carried unmistakable authority. My stomach twisted. We had rehearsed hiding, we had rehearsed responses, but nothing could truly prepare me for this moment. The reality of potential exposure pressed down like a weight, each heartbeat an urgent drum of fear. Emma's hand squeezed mine gently, grounding me, reminding me that I was not facing this alone. Yet the fear of judgment, of punishment, and of losing control of my identity surged through me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as much as possible. The mirror reflected my transformation, showing a self I barely recognized yet fiercely claimed. This reflection, once a private thrill, was now a shield and a declaration. I could hide, I could apologize, I could deny everything, but that would betray the courage I had built, the trust Emma had extended, and the identity I had fought to explore. The choice loomed large: retreat into obedience, or embrace the risk and affirm who I was in this moment. The doorknob turned slowly, a deliberate, almost torturous motion. Mrs. Carmichael's shadow appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the room. Time seemed to freeze. I felt my pulse in my throat, in my ears, in my fingertips clutching the fabric of my dress. Emma's presence was warm and reassuring, yet even her calm could not fully dissolve the tension that had been building for hours. I could see the recognition in Mrs. Carmichael's eyes, the realization that something was different, that the rules she had imposed were being challenged. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the faint ticking of the clock, until it became almost unbearable. Emma stepped forward slightly, a subtle gesture of solidarity. "Mrs. Carmichael," she began softly, her voice calm yet assertive, "Alex wanted to show me something. Please, just listen." The words hung in the air, delicate but powerful. I felt my reflection in the mirror shift, no longer just a personal image but a shared statement of courage and defiance. The room seemed charged, every breath, every heartbeat, every glance amplified by the intensity of the moment. Mrs. Carmichael's gaze flicked between us, her expression unreadable. The suspense reached its peak. My mind raced, considering escape, apology, explanation, any strategy that might mitigate the consequences. Yet beneath the fear, there was a rising sense of empowerment, a recognition that this confrontation, this revelation, was necessary. The transformation, the trust, the identity I had cultivated over years of secrecy, had led to this defining moment. And in that suspended instant, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. Then, unexpectedly, Mrs. Carmichael spoke, her tone softer than I anticipated. "I see, you've been hiding this part of yourself," she said, her eyes scanning my reflection. "I didn't expect it, but I can see the care, the thought, and the courage behind it." Relief and disbelief surged through me simultaneously. The suspense remained, the risk had not disappeared, but the initial confrontation had shifted. There was an acknowledgement, a moment of recognition that our secret, though fragile, was being seen and perhaps understood. Emma exhaled softly beside me, her presence grounding, her support unwavering. The tension slowly ebbed, replaced by a mixture of relief, lingering fear, and exhilaration. I realized that this climax, the near discovery, the confrontation, and the acknowledgement had crystallized the emotional stakes. Identity, secrecy, courage, and trust had collided in a single, defining moment. And as Mrs. Carmichael stepped back, offering a measured silence that neither punished nor condemned, I understood that the balance of risk and reward, fear and empowerment, had shifted. We had survived the moment of highest tension, yet the story was far from over. The seconds stretched endlessly as Mrs. Carmichael remained in the doorway, her eyes flicking between my reflection and Emma's face. Every muscle in my body tensed, yet I refused to shrink back. I held the mirror lightly in my hands, a tangible anchor amid the chaos of fear and exhilaration. The reflection staring back at me was no longer just a fantasy or a secret indulgence, it was a declaration. I could see every subtle detail, the carefully applied makeup, the delicate curve of my lips, the shimmer of the dress catching the light. Each element felt magnified, a testament to the time and courage invested in this transformation. Emma's hand squeezed mine again, a silent reassurance, grounding me in the moment. "You're okay," she whispered softly, her eyes never leaving mine. "We're okay." Her words, gentle but firm, bolstered my resolve. Yet the tension was far from dissipated. Mrs. Carmichael's presence, her scrutiny, was a constant reminder that the rules of the house still existed, and that one misstep could undo everything. Every heartbeat felt like a drum of suspense, echoing through the room, through my chest, and into my very bones. Suddenly, a soft laugh escaped Emma, almost involuntarily, breaking some of the tension. "You look incredible," she said, her voice light but sincere. "Absolutely incredible." Relief mingled with a surge of pride. I dared a small smile, adjusting the scarf around my shoulders. But the moment of calm was fleeting. A small slip, a strand of hair falling across my cheek, made me freeze. I caught it just in time, but the near mistake heightened the awareness of fragility. Every gesture, every motion, now carried weight, consequence, and potential exposure. The suspense sharpened, like a knife poised over the next heartbeat. Mrs. Carmichael took a cautious step forward. "I can see you've put thought into this, but why hide it?" Her voice was measured, probing yet not accusatory. I swallowed hard, the words lodged in my throat. This was the moment I had anticipated yet dreaded, the moment to explain, to justify, to reveal the reasoning behind years of secrecy. The temptation to flee, to revert to Alex the obedient boy, was strong. But I couldn't. The person reflected in the mirror demanded acknowledgement, demanded that this secret self be seen, understood, and, perhaps, respected. Emma's presence gave me courage. "Because, it's part of who he is," she said, emphasizing my name carefully. "And hiding this part of him, it wasn't fair. He's brave for even showing it now." Her words struck a chord, resonating deeply within the room and within me. The suspense of potential punishment lingered, yet a small shift occurred, a subtle acknowledgement that courage could be recognized without condemnation. The emotional stakes remained high, but the tension transformed into a nuanced understanding that combined fear, relief, and exhilaration in a delicate balance. I noticed a slight tremor in Mrs. Carmichael's hands as she gestured toward the mirror. "I see. This transformation, it's not just clothing, is it?" Her observation was sharp, perceptive. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of vulnerability settle fully upon me. "No," I admitted quietly. "It's who I can be when no one's watching. When I can be me." The words felt raw, honest, and liberating. The suspense of potential judgment remained, but it was layered now with a fragile trust, a tension between exposure and understanding, between fear and acceptance. Then, something unexpected happened. I reached for the small silver bracelet that had belonged to my mother, the one I had used as part of the transformation. It slipped from my wrist and clattered to the floor, a sharp, metallic sound that seemed deafening in the room. My heart leapt violently. Emma froze, and Mrs. Carmichael's gaze snapped to the sound. The symbolic prop, the bracelet that anchored my transformation, had betrayed me. Every nerve in my body screamed that discovery was imminent. The suspense exploded, thick and suffocating, as if time had slowed to stretch each heartbeat into an eternity. I bent quickly to retrieve it, heels clicking sharply against the floor, the fabric of the dress swishing around my legs. The mirror reflected the rapid, almost panicked movement, amplifying the vulnerability of the moment. Emma's eyes met mine, wide and tense, silently urging calm. Mrs. Carmichael remained still, studying us intently. The clatter of the bracelet was more than a sound, it was a symbol of exposure, a tangible manifestation of risk that reminded us both how delicate the balance between secrecy and revelation had become. Every action now carried immense weight, every movement a test of composure under extreme pressure. Breathing heavily, I fastened the bracelet back onto my wrist, my hands trembling slightly. The suspense remained, electric and immediate, but the moment also crystallized something deeper. Identity, courage, vulnerability, and trust had collided in an instant, each element amplified by the near disaster. Emma's hand found mine again, anchoring me in the moment, while Mrs. Carmichael's gaze softened slightly, though the tension of authority remained. The climax of suspense had reached a peak, yet the story was not finished. The next moments would define the transition from revelation to resolution, from fear to understanding, or from trust to conflict. The house was quiet again, but the silence was heavy, charged with the aftermath of the confrontation. Emma and I stood together, the room still bathed in the fading golden light of the evening. Mrs. Carmichael had retreated slightly, remaining in the doorway, her expression unreadable but softer than before. Relief mixed with lingering tension, a delicate balance that made my heart race even as I tried to exhale calmly. I felt the weight of the transformation: the dress, the heels, the scarf, and the bracelet-like armor, fragile but real, shielding me from exposure yet amplifying every sense of vulnerability. Emma's hand squeezed mine lightly, a quiet reassurance. "That was intense," she whispered, her voice low, almost reverent. "But you handled it perfectly." I nodded, still trembling slightly, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The mirror reflected both of us, our reflections intertwined in a moment of trust, courage, and shared secrecy. I realized then that this journey was far from over. Identity, fear, courage, and discovery had collided, creating a fragile equilibrium that could shift at any second. Mrs. Carmichael stepped forward slowly, her gaze fixed on me. "Alex," she said carefully, her tone measured, "I need to think about what I've just seen." "But," she paused, searching for words. "I also see that this part of you is important. I can't ignore it, even if it breaks some of my own rules." The tension in her voice was palpable, a mixture of authority, hesitation, and a flicker of understanding. My chest tightened, a surge of hope battling the ever-present fear of judgment. For the first time, it seemed possible that my secret could coexist with the rules of the house, but the uncertainty remained, sharp and unyielding. Emma leaned closer, whispering, "Whatever happens, I'm with you." Her presence grounded me, anchoring me in courage and connection even as suspense lingered like a shadow. I could feel my heartbeat slow slightly, but the tension was far from gone. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the curtains, every distant noise carried the potential for disruption. The thrill of secrecy, the risk of discovery, and the exhilaration of transformation had combined into an emotional cocktail that made me both alive and precariously exposed. I looked at the mirror again, my reflection a reminder of the duality I embodied. Alex, the obedient boy who followed the rules, and the expressive persona I had revealed, confident yet vulnerable, intertwined within me. The bracelet glinted faintly in the last light, a symbol of both identity and fragility. I adjusted it once more, feeling the weight of the risk, the thrill, and the courage that had brought me to this point. The suspense lingered in every fiber of my being, a constant reminder that the story was far from over. Then, unexpectedly, the phone buzzed on the dresser. Emma glanced at it, her eyes wide. "It's a message, from someone," she said softly, passing it to me. My hands trembled as I read the text, a simple, cryptic line that sent a shiver down my spine. "I know what you did. Be ready." The words were brief but loaded with meaning, a looming threat that instantly pulled the suspense back to its peak. Emma's hand found mine instinctively, and I felt a surge of adrenaline and fear unlike anything before. The story had taken an entirely new turn, our fragile triumph now shadowed by a mysterious, imminent challenge. I swallowed hard, glancing at Mrs. Carmichael, whose expression had shifted to cautious concern. The rules of the house, the hidden identity, the shared trust with Emma, all of it teetered on the edge of exposure. My reflection in the mirror seemed to stare back at me knowingly, the duality of my identity amplified by the uncertainty of what was to come. The tension, previously concentrated in secrecy, now extended outward into the unknown, leaving every emotion raw, every heartbeat electric, and every possibility suspended in the fragile space between fear and courage. As the sun disappeared entirely, leaving the room in shadows, I realized that nothing could prepare me for what came next. Every instinct screamed vigilance, every fiber of my being was alert to risk, and yet the thrill of transformation, connection, and shared trust with Emma coursed through me, unyielding and potent. The cliffhanger was set, the suspense unresolved, and the story remained suspended in a moment of high-stakes tension. Viewers would be left wondering, what would happen when the threat arrived? Could my secret survive? And what role would Emma and Mrs. Carmichael play as the next chapter unfolded? The house was silent once more, yet nothing felt truly safe. I glanced at Emma, her eyes reflecting the same mix of fear and exhilaration that surged through me. The mirror captured our reflections together, intertwined yet separate, fragile yet defiant. And then, the final sound, another soft creak from the hallway, reminded us both that suspense, exposure, and the challenges of identity were far from over. The story paused here, unresolved, leaving everything hanging on the brink, a perfect cliffhanger that demanded anticipation, speculation, and engagement. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell us in the comments what you think will happen next. Will Alex's secret survive? Will the mysterious message change everything? Stay tuned for the next chapter to find out.